All right, everyone, good evening and welcome to another edition of the I Am Abel Foundation's Medicine Makers, where if your destination is a career in medicine, we're going to show you how to get there. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I am your host, Dr. Renee Roberts, board-certified family medicine physician, and I am also a mentor with the I Am Abel Foundation. Tonight, we are super excited to welcome our guest. This is Dr. Kwame Foucher.
Hello, Dr. Renee. Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. Dr. Kwame Foucher is a board-certified family medicine physician, speaker, author, dad coach. We're going to hear a little bit more about that later on in the show. And he is here to speak with us today about our topic known as Adverse Childhood Experiences, or ACE.
Yeah, absolutely delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm so proud of you, Dr. Renee, for all the things that you've been doing as a physician and with the I Am Abel Foundation, encouraging and motivating doctors to mentor. It's just a fantastic thing that the organization is doing, and I'm so proud of you, Dr.
Well,
Renee.
thank you so much, Dr. Foucher. I appreciate that. Well, before we dive into tonight's topic, of course, you know how this works. I've got to do just a few announcements. You are watching us right now on Chicago's CAN TV, Channel 21, also broadcasting on AT&T, Channel 99. If you are not in front of a television, you can watch us online at www.cantv.org/hotline. And don't forget that this is a live call-in show. You should see the phone number there at the bottom of the screen. It is area code 312-738-1060. So if you have a question tonight about adverse childhood experiences, please feel free to call in and ask to speak with our lovely guest here, Dr. Foucher. Just to give you a little bit of information about the I Am Abel Foundation, we are a Chicago-based nonprofit that pairs physicians with students, high school, college, and post-baccalaureate students that are interested in pursuing careers in medicine. So we are actually helping to raise the next generation of healthcare heroes. Also to note, we are currently in our recruitment process, so if you are a student or know a student that has expressed some interest in becoming a physician, please point them to the I Am Abel website, which is www.iamable.org, and Abel is spelled A-B-E-L. We are actually in the middle of our applications for our Urban Bridges Mentoring Program, so you can find more information about that on the I Am Abel website.
That sounds magnificent.
Yes, thank you. And actually, we're accepting applications through March 1st. Okay, well, that's it for the announcements. We are going to go ahead and get started tonight with the distinguished Dr. Kwame Foucher. So, I always like to start out and ask our guests, tell us a little bit about how you came to a career in medicine.
I grew up right here in the city of Chicago, and I thought that one of the biggest problems in our community was a lack of healthcare services, and a lack of healthcare services that came from people that look like us. So I was motivated and inspired myself to go and become a physician. And in fact, my first job was in the community that I grew up, just about 4 miles away from where I grew up. So I had a chance to deliver babies of former neighbors and take care of grandparents from my neighborhood. So it really was the dream job when I became a family physician and came back to Chicago to do that work.
That is fantastic. Well, we are super excited to have you here with us in the CAN TV studios. Okay, well, we've got a juicy topic. This is very thought-provoking. We want to dive right in. We are talking this evening about ACE, also known as Adverse Childhood Experiences. I'll be honest with you, Dr. Foucher, I did not know much about this topic until I was doing research this week for the show. So why don't we start out and let's educate our audience about adverse childhood experiences. What are they?
Well, we have to go back to 1995 when the foundational research was done. It was sponsored by the Kaiser Foundation, and I believe also the Centers for Disease Control was involved with that seminal research in 1995 that documented some of the social factors which were contributing to disease. And they found that children who were exposed to an increased number of adverse experiences. And by adverse experiences, they define those as being victim of physical or emotional abuse, witness to domestic violence, being neglected, growing up in situations where there was poverty, abject poverty, and all of these things contributed to just an increased level of stress for children. And as children were exposed to these stressors, they found out by studying them as adults that adults had a shortened lifespan and an increased rate of risk of chronic diseases. And by chronic disease, we're talking about diabetes, heart disease, atherosclerotic disease, things that truly affect not just the mental health of an adult, but also the physical health of an adult. So, and they were able to draw a parallel and see that there was correlation with the number of adverse experiences that these people had as children.
Wow, that is just, it's still mind-boggling to think that someone as an adult that has diabetes or depression or hypertension, that very well may have been triggered, or the foundation for that may have been something that occurred in their childhood.
And as physicians, it's so important that we recognize some of these factors that contribute to the disease that aren't necessarily clinical in nature. And, we get to thinking as physicians that so much of our job is about healing disease per se, but there are all of these other factors that contribute to a patient's well-being and safety throughout the course of their life. So that's what this research really pointed shed the light on. And it's amazing that even now, 25 years later, so many people haven't heard of it, but it's so important. But I think the challenge is, what do we do about it now that we have identified these things? And we're still, the jury is still out on effective efforts that go on to help people to overcome those childhood adversities and give them the same fair shot at life that they deserve.
Very well said. Well, I think that is an encompassing theme and something that I had come across this past week doing research, that what happens during childhood is strongly associated with health outcomes in adulthood. I mean, that's pivotal.
And, a lot of people would think, naturally that those stressors contribute to challenges like mental health problems, like depression and anxiety, and in fact they do. And in fact, I think if you had more than 4 adverse childhood experiences, there's a astronomical increase in the rate of suicide and chronic depressive illness as an adult. So, that is true. But what is really surprising is the rate of chronic disease that's of a clinical medical nature that is then correlated with stress as a child.
Yes, that was one thing that was key, was the mentioning of a toxic stress environment and what that stress does to the developing brain of a child. I have I love my fun facts, so I have a couple of fun facts just to kind of piggyback off of what it is that you said. So you mentioned about those core adverse childhood experiences. Just some information for our viewing audience. The research studies have shown that approximately 61%, that's a very large number, I'm going to say it again, 61% of adults have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience in their lifetime. And as you had just mentioned briefly, for people that have had 4 or more adverse childhood experiences, they're 2 times more likely to smoke cigarettes, 4 times is likely to engage in drug abuse, 7 times more likely to suffer from chronic alcoholism, 11 times more likely to abuse drugs, especially those via injection, like heroin, and 19 times more likely to attempt suicide.
Yeah, those are astounding statistics and speak to the significance of adverse childhood experiences. And, as a medical community, I like to know what we can do about it. And if you're watching at home and if this is piquing your interest, we certainly want to hear your call with your question. Maybe there's
Absolutely.
something that we can do to help stimulate the conversation here and get people motivated and activated to strengthening those children, helping people to stay healthy throughout the whole span of life.
Very well said again. Okay, so you are watching Medicine Makers here on CAN TV. I am your host, Dr. Renee Roberts, and tonight's guest is the distinguished Dr. Kwame Foucher, board-certified family medicine physician, speaker, author, and dad coach. We're going to get to that in just a second. So we know what these adverse childhood experiences are. The studies have proven now that they can contribute to these chronic illnesses in adulthood. What in the world are we supposed to do? As physicians, you have a double role because you are actually both physician and father. So what do you suggest that we do?
Well, we've got some great research, and the Centers on Developing Children out of Harvard have come up with 3 cornerstones of treatment that really emphasize helping children to recover and prepare for a healthy lifestyle. And I should state that, just because you've had experience with adverse childhood events does not mean that all of a sudden your lifespan is shortened. These are just risk factors, significant risk factors with a high correlation towards illness, but that's not a sentence for you if, for example, you came from a household where there was divorce, which is one of the adverse childhood experiences. If there was an adult in your household who had mental illness or had another chronic illness, those are adverse childhood experiences as well. And so most of us know, and I have had experiences with adverse childhood experiences myself. So what are the things that help people to overcome those things and still be successful in life? I think that's the nature of your question.
Yes.
And so it's not just what we can do inside the exam room as physicians, but what we're able to do as policymakers, as scientists, and as social interventionalists, our social workers, our psychologists, etc. What we do to strengthen children is we support responsive relationships with adults. And when you mentioned that I was a dad coach, this is my new career, offshooting out of my career as medicine, but the way that I help to support responsive relationships is to help support dads in their efforts to control dad stress. That's a term that I've kind of coined that just says, it's really hard to be a father with oversight of children and doing all the things that you have to do to manage your career and your own health and relationship with the parent, with the other parent, and interacting in your community. Those things strengthen a person to be more stable and be able to be more effective in interacting with their child. And the better a child has a relationship with a adult who has permanence in their life, the better they are buoyed to deal with childhood adversity. So that speaks to the importance of mentorship, like we're doing here with the I Am Abel Foundation. A good mentor can be that person for a child. Of course, a parent can too. And your first teacher is your parent, be it your dad or your mom. But, there's so much that happens in a relationship that makes it challenging for fathers to stay involved in the lives of their children. So that's the thing that I'm particularly passionate about. And this adverse childhood experiences data kind of motivated that. But to go back to the other pillars, one was supporting responsive relationships. 2 is strengthening core life skills. And that might be teaching meditation or yoga or getting a child active in sports because exercise is shown to help to bolster your response and bolster your resilience when there are challenges in life. So team sports are great for that. They build relationships, there's coaching involved, and there's physical activity. So to the extent that your children are involved in team sports, that's always a great way to build resilience. And finally, and I'm just kind of skimming the surface so we can try and get to as many as we can, but reduce sources of stress, of course. So if the issue is abject poverty, what do we do to provide supports for those families to make sure that there's food on the table, to make sure that there is enough economic empowerment in that household, that there's money to pay all of the bills, that housing never becomes a concern, that there are things in place that strengthen a community so that violence isn't so pervasive. Because if you grow up and you don't have safety when you go outside your front door, that contributes to adversity. And again, if we can't shield a child from adversity, but how we stabilize that child and help them to manage adversity over time, that's how we give them the life skills that promote resilience and allow them to have the tools to overcome in the long run.
Very well said, Dr. Foucher. Yes, I think one thing that we need to keep in mind too, which I know is I've had a mind shift this past week, just learning about this topic, but would you agree that adverse childhood experiences is a public health crisis?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and that's why I say, it's not just what we do in the exam room, but it's about public policy. It's about lawmakers becoming aware and making sure that there are enough social supports. It's about people going into fields like psychology and social work and making sure that there is a good financial incentive for people to achieve higher levels of education and go out into the community and get jobs that do things like support our children and support families in ways that are very practical, because that's how we build a better future, and that's how we build in inherently resilience in these children.
Okay, so again, you are watching Medicine Makers this evening with our guest, Dr. Kwame Foucher, and we were speaking about adverse childhood experiences. One thing that you mentioned that I thought was key, because we certainly don't want to be Debbie Downer here and, give people the impression, if you have had an adverse childhood experience or maybe fall into that category where you have had 4 or more, that it's over and that you're doomed, and that there is no way that you're going to be able to help, your future health. That is definitely not the case. This is just here information that we wanted to present to you to better empower you, because of course knowledge is power. But I think that part of what is key is that we realize that connection. Why is it that, your son or your uncle or whoever is smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day? It may not be just that they have a love affair with nicotine. It might be that they are coping with stress from something that happened a long time ago. One thing that I'm hoping that you can touch upon too that I thought was interesting in terms of how are we going to work around this, how are we going to help reduce these effects on down the line of adverse childhood experiences. Something that can happen a bit in several communities is the taboo subject. Maybe someone was physically abused, sexually abused. That's so rampant. And especially when that happens to you at such a young age. As a child, oftentimes, kids just have a hard time coping with something that serious. And what do you do if you're in a family where that's a taboo subject and we don't talk about, things of that nature? I know I've even had a few cases with patients that had mentioned to me in confidence that they had been sexually abused, and I was like the first time that they had ever mentioned that to anybody. Their spouse didn't know, or they weren't even able to tell their parents, or God forbid they told their parents, and then their parents didn't believe them.
Yeah, these experiences that degrade trust for a child also bleed over into the establishment of meaningful relationships in adulthood as well. So what do we do for people? We try and plug them in with good psychosocial care and support. Making sure that counseling services are available in communities. I think you said, what do we tell the child who's been exposed? That you can trust your doctor, you can trust your teacher or your school social worker, you can trust your coach. There are people who are mandated reporters who, if we identify that there's a child who's been exposed to a situation that causes them harm, we have to do something about it. If you go to your doctor's office, it's our job to make sure that we help children. So, we do the HEADS assessment with a lot of adolescents. I think an adolescent is the one who's most likely to have turmoil about what should I say, what shouldn't I say. But any child who's concerned about their health and safety at home is going to struggle with that. As care providers, we have to make children feel comfortable and give them a safe space to share. But as parents, we also can't be afraid of those taboo subjects either. And there's something that we must do internally if we're going to empower the next generation to do better or to succeed. We don't want to stand in the way of our own children. And that's, again, some of the stuff that I talk about with dads as a dad coach. What can I do to get the help that I need so that I don't stand in the way of my children succeeding? And as I struggle with my own issues, how do I do that in a way that gives my child the ability to overcome things so that they don't have to repeat things that I might have had difficulty with?
Absolutely. And I think this is like a takeaway, take-home point for me is do not remain silent. I think that goes both for the children and as teenagers, adults, and for the parents as well. If you, as a parent, are struggling and don't quite know how to cope, with these things that might be going on in your home or have gone on in your home, to know when to raise your hand and speak up and ask for help. The health and well-being, the mental health, the physical health, the psychosocial health of your child may very well depend on that. And like Dr. Foucher has mentioned, yes, you guys are empowered to actually break the cycle. It's something that I think affects a lot of people here in Chicago. We hear about it all the time, the gun violence, the gang violence, and to think about all of that trauma and repeated trauma that has happened to so many Chicagoans and what that ultimately can have on their health.
And we really, I see a wonderful thing that the I Am Abel Foundation is doing by empowering people with hope and giving people a place to go to connect up with a mentor and give yourself tools to build a better future. And if you've made it and you want to reach back out, what better way than to mentor a young person who's interested in medicine?
Absolutely.
So there's so many wonderful careers out here that help people. Being a doctor is just one of them. We've mentioned several others. But to the extent that we can get good services into the community, that we can give children and adults what they need to be empowered to better take care of their own health and better care for each other, that's really the key. It's an entire community effort.
Okay, well, we are about to wrap up here. Time just goes by so fast when you're learning so much. So,
you've been a fantastic host. So
thank you very much. Well, you've been a fantastic guest, everyone. This is Dr. Kwame Foucher, board-certified family medicine physician, speaker, author, and now dad coach. Thank you so much for the insightful information this evening. If you guys would like to learn more about Dr. Kwame Foucher, how could they find you?
Please look me up on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. My handle is DrKWAMEFOUCHER on all of those platforms. Join my tribe, the Dr. Kwame group on Facebook, where we disseminate information about being a dad and give people tools to make their best effort.
Okay, well, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for watching Medicine Makers. No show next week in observance of President's Day, but we'll be back on the air February 24th, 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. I am Dr. Renee Roberts, your host. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight, and have a good evening.
Have a great day. Thank you.